Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm working for IFC. IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So we do investments in private sector in emerging markets, and we started about 60 years ago. The topic of today of the intervention, I was asked by Yannick and the organizers to share a couple of learnings in terms of what does it take from an investor's perspective to actually invest in private sector in fragile and conflict situations. And that's what I will try to do. My job, I'm based in Nairobi, and I was hired to actually increase the IFC footprint in those challenging markets across Africa. So as you can imagine, FCS, fragile and conflict situations, are not the easiest and the most engaging perspective for an investor. Those are places where there's a lot of volatility. Many countries fall back into conflict. There's no information available in many cases, so you cannot wake up in the morning and watch Bloomberg and get a lot of information about opportunities, latest trends. So information is not there. There's often a collusion between the political sphere, the economic sphere, and that's something that investors are extremely reluctant to get into, except if you are a shady one, but those are the ones we wouldn't like to work with. So for many reasons, I think there are opportunities, but it's not easy to really materialize them and leverage them. So what is the IFC doing in that space? We started very slowly. So 5 years ago, we had a portfolio of about $300 million of investment in fragile and conflict situations across the board, in Africa, in Asia, in the Caribbean. Today, we have a little bit more than 10 times more. So 5 years down the road, we have a portfolio of $3.5 billion in FCS. Last year, we invested $1 billion in fragile and conflict situations, but only $200 million in Africa. And that's where we are struggling to some extent. And therefore, the learnings I would like to share. So from my take and the institutional perspective, there are 7, 8 key things you need to do if you want to do a difference in FCS with the private sector. The first one, and it's not rocket science, it's you need to be present on the ground. We do 90% of our business in fragile and conflict situations when we have people on the ground. Obviously, it shouldn't be something new for you, but it's absolutely key. And not only having people on the ground, but having the right profile of people. So not the traditional investment officer who is sitting in his nice air-conditioned office somewhere in São Paulo or somewhere in South Africa, but the person who has an entrepreneurial mindset, who is on the ground, who goes out of the office, looks for opportunities, follows up with sponsors and liaises with the government. So people on the ground is one of the key lessons. The second one is the political economy. I'm still remembering the shock that we had with South Sudan. We had 3 permanent staff on the ground. We helped organizing with partners, big investors conference, 600 investors flying in from all over the world, and we all left walking on water, thinking about 200 million pipeline deal in South Sudan in the next 3 years. 3 days after this investors conference, the civil war started, and since then the country has been going down in a very constant way. So this political economy, looking at where we are and getting a sense of what's happening is absolutely key. So it requires going beyond our own narrative of the hope for the country. I would say that adopting also a conflict-sensitive approach at the project level is something key. It's something that traditionally we have not been good at, but doing no harm is really essential in those markets. So taking more time, looking at the ground, looking at the drivers of conflict and fragility, and making sure that when we do an investment, we do not reinforce those. It's absolutely key. That's something that we are starting to do in Africa, and I hope that it will be expanded across the institution. So people on the ground, political economy, conflict-sensitive approach are 2 key things. The third one is something that Professor Collier has been advocating for years and years. It's de-risking the investment in those markets, and in particular leveraging public money to actually take the first loss, make sure that we don't need the government sovereign guarantee when we do a big infrastructure deal, or make local financing financing in local currencies available at a cheaper cost. So all of that is something new, and the IDA 18 replenishment that we are currently discussing is for the first time allocating a significant amount of public money to de-risk the investments that could be done in FCS. And that's absolutely key. It's key, it's essential, it's not enough. The next point I would like to highlight is the fact that to build a business in fragile and conflict situations, particularly in Africa, you need to actually literally incubate the project. So you need to go beyond what a traditional investor would like to do, but you need to partner with local firms. You need to identify them, and you need to support them. I will just give you the example of a small logistic firm in an Ebola-impacted country in West Africa. They've done a great job. Now they are not directly ready for an investment, for an IFC investment, but we will be helping them over the next 2 years on governance, on compliance, and on operations. If nobody is doing that, they won't have an opportunity to really grow and then be investment ready for us, for FMO and others. So literally incubating projects and helping the entrepreneur at those 3 levels, compliance, governance, and operations, is absolutely key. And that's new. It's not your traditional investor's mindset. Next point, next lesson I would like to highlight is the fact that we need to, in our jargon, broaden the impact of investment. What does it mean? When we do an investment in an extractive in DRC, it's not only doing investment, but making sure that we work with local small and medium enterprises so that they get access to the mine, so that they can start selling goods and providing services to the mine. So this connection, connecting local value chains, equipping them with skills and finance to meet the business opportunity of a larger investment is key. And I think that's something that we have started doing, and we would like to do that much more. The 2 other points that I would like to highlight before stopping is partnerships. We cannot do that alone. We need to do it with like-minded investors and institutions. In those fragile and conflict situations in Africa, we have a partnership with the Klingendal Foundation, and we leverage their skills on the conflict-sensitive approach. We are co-investing with institutions like CORDED in Sierra Leone and Liberia, for example. We are also increasingly co-investing with other European DFIs, FMO, the CDC, Proparco, and this will keep on growing, this co-investment part. And so partnerships are key. And all the work that I mentioned about broadening the impact, incubating the pipeline of future projects is being done with the support of the Dutch, Norwegian, and Irish government. And the last point before stopping is innovation. Innovation is the reason why I'm here today, not because I'm an innovator, but because I want to learn from you. And I've been coming to the Ignite conference for a couple of times. This innovation factor, thinking differently about things, tweaking solutions that we may have to adapt them to a local market is absolutely key. And that's what I hope to find here today, particularly around the refugee discussion. And voila, I will stop there. I'm looking forward to very dynamic and enlightening discussions.
Please give a warm hand. No, please, don't run away. I have a few more questions.
Okay. Sorry.
If you can take this mic. Yannick Dupont made a link between entrepreneurship and education. And your experience, when you look around, you're talking about partners, you're talking about entrepreneurs. What do you feel is worth, what kind of education, scholarships, fields should one invest in more for students in the various countries you work in?
Tricky question, thanks. I would see a lot of future in private education. The lady who is, I'm living in Nairobi, the lady who is coming twice a week to clean the house, she's sending her children to a private school. I'm not sure about the level of education, but I think making sure that we ensure that the curricula being taught is a relevant one, that the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial skills are also part of the curricula would be, for me, key elements. On the ground, I see entrepreneurs that we are talking to in Africa coming from very different backgrounds. So you don't need to have done an MBA, and preferably not, maybe. But understanding the market, being dynamic, willing to take risk, I think those are key drivers. And that's the type of things we are looking for.
Well, here people are a bit afraid of what we call robotization and technology as something that will take away jobs. What do you see in, for example, African countries? When you look at universities, are they ready for the future?
I don't know. It's a good question. What I see in a country like Ethiopia, for example, is industrialization happening. You see market opportunities, you see new free zones, and a lot of international entrepreneurs and businessmen investing to actually produce in Ethiopia. And I don't see any specific challenge about robotization. So maybe it relies on low skills jobs and low paid jobs, but I think it's this industrialization happening in Ethiopia today is something that was not existing a couple of years back.
We always, having lived in the Arab world for a long time, I felt that I might have learned more than I initially realized. You know, that's why I asked how many Europeans are here. What can we learn from entrepreneurs in the countries you're working in, for example, in Nairobi, from the entrepreneurship you see around you?
Resilience.
Resilience.
I think resilience is the key word. It's not an easy path. It's not always a rosy life, but resilience is key. And I see people who have tried, who have failed, are coming back and do it better the second time. And I think that's what we need to support and enable as much as possible. So it's really resilience.
I think resilience is something that you learn in real life and not so much at university. Huh? So
Absolutely.
Being an entrepreneur and being resilient, thank you very much for your introduction.
Yeah.
Again, a warm applause for Michel. Thank you.